The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room flickered above me as I stared at my trembling hands. 10 years. 10 years since Sarah's passing, and I thought I had finally found happiness again. How wrong I was. But let me start from the beginning. That's what my therapist would say. Begin at the start. Process it step by step. Though I doubt any amount of processing will ease this hollow ache in my chest. I spent a decade being the responsible single father, watching my son, Jake, grow from a quiet 8-year-old into a young man. Our house, once filled with Sarah's laughter and the chaos of family life, had grown increasingly silent. Jake, now 18, was rarely home, busy with college applications and his own life. The emptiness of our home seemed to echo with memories of better days. That's probably why I was so receptive when my colleague Tom insisted I attend his birthday party at Riverside Bistro. "Mark, you can't spend another weekend reorganizing your garage," he'd said. "You need to meet people. Live a little." I remember every detail of that evening, the soft jazz playing in the background, the clinking of wine glasses, and most vividly, the moment Olivia walked in. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders. But it wasn't her obvious beauty that caught my attention. It was the way she listened intently to everyone who spoke to her, offering genuine smiles and thoughtful responses. She had a warmth that seemed to draw people in naturally. When Tom introduced us, I expected the usual polite but distant interaction I'd grown accustomed to from younger people. Instead, Olivia's eyes lit up when she learned I was a structural engineer. "Really? I just finished reading about the restoration of the Brooklyn Bridge. The engineering behind those original caisson foundations is fascinating." That conversation sparked something I thought had died with Sarah, genuine connection. We talked for hours that night, about everything from architecture to our favorite sci-fi novels. She was 26, yes, but her old soul matched mine, in ways I couldn't explain. As our relationship developed over the following months, I learned about her work as a content creator. She was upfront about it. She had a successful OnlyFans presence and ran a subscription-based platform where she shared lifestyle content and fashion photography. "It's all very tasteful," she explained over coffee on our third date. "I've built a community that appreciates artistic expression." I'll admit, I had my reservations at first, not about her choice of career. I respected her entrepreneurial spirit, but about us. Would someone so young, so vibrant, really want to build a life with a 45-year-old widower? But Olivia's actions consistently proved my doubts wrong. She brought life back into our home. The first time she came over for dinner, she and Jake ended up in an intense debate about whether book-to-screen adaptations could ever truly capture the essence of the original work. I stood in the kitchen, listening to their animated voices, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. Jake seemed to bloom in Olivia's presence. He started spending more time at home, often joining us for movie nights or helping Olivia with her photography projects. She had a way of drawing him out of his shell, getting him to talk about his dreams of studying film production. "You've raised an amazing son," she told me one evening as we watched Jake setting up his camera equipment in the backyard. "He has such a unique perspective on the world." Those words meant everything to me. Sarah would have loved to see Jake pursuing his passion for filmmaking. Sometimes, watching Olivia and Jake collaborate on various creative projects, I could almost imagine Sarah smiling down on us, approving of this new chapter in our lives. By the time I proposed, 8 months into our relationship, it felt right. We had a small ceremony in my backyard, just close family and friends. Jake was my best man, and the speech he gave brought tears to my eyes. "Dad," he said, "I haven't seen you this happy in years. Olivia, thank you for bringing that spark back into our lives." I thought that was the beginning of our happily ever after. Olivia moved in, and suddenly our house felt like a home again. We talked about having a child of our own, about Jake becoming a big brother. The future stretched out before us, full of promise. If only I'd known that future was built on quicksand. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs. The whispered phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The way Jake and Olivia sometimes shared knowing looks across. The dinner table. The mysterious weekend photography projects that neither of them wanted to discuss in detail. But love, especially when it comes after years of loneliness, has a way of blinding you to the obvious. It makes you trust when you should question, believe when you should doubt. As I sit here in this sterile hospital room, my world crumbling around me, I can't help but wonder, was any of it real? Or was I just a convenient mark in an elaborate game I didn't know I was playing? The message from Tom still burns in my mind. "Mark, I think there's something you need to see." Tom's message came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I had just finished a presentation to our biggest client, feeling on top of the world. Funny how life waits for your highest moments before it pulls the ground from beneath your feet. The link he sent came with a warning. "You better be sitting down for this." I almost dismissed it as spam. These days, suspicious links are a dime a dozen. But something in Tom's follow-up message made my blood run cold. "Mark, I'm so sorry, but if it were me, I'd want to know." My office suddenly felt too small, too warm. With trembling fingers, I clicked the link. The website that loaded looked familiar, similar to the OnlyFans platform Olivia had shown me months ago. But this wasn't her regular account. This was something else entirely. The first image hit me like a physical blow. Olivia, my wife, wrapped in an intimate embrace with my son. I blinked hard, praying it was some sick Photoshop job. But as I scrolled, my worst nightmares unfolded before my eyes. Dozens of photos, each more intimate than the last. Some in our bedroom, our kitchen, the studio we had built for her professional shoots. The timestamps. God, the timestamps. These weren't recent photos. Some dated back to before our wedding. While I was planning our future together, they were... My chest constricted. The room started spinning, and I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. The last thing I remember was reaching for my desk phone, trying to dial for help before everything went black. I woke up to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the concerned face of Dr. Richards, who had treated me since Sarah's passing. "Severe anxiety attack," he explained, checking my vitals. "Your colleague found you unconscious in your office and called 911, but I barely heard him, because there, in the corner of the hospital room, stood Olivia. She looked scared, vulnerable, exactly like the young woman I had fallen in love with. The perfect actress. Mark, please, let me explain," she started, taking a step toward me. The monitor's beeping accelerated as rage surged through my body. "Explain?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Explain how you seduced my son? How you both made a fool of me?" "It's not what you think." She reached for my hand, but I jerked away so violently that the IV stand rattled. "Don't you dare!" "Touch me!" The words ripped from my throat. "Where is he? Where's Jake?" "Dad." His voice came from the doorway. My son, my own flesh and blood, stood there, his face a mask of... what? Guilt? Defiance? I couldn't read him anymore. This stranger wearing my son's face. "How long?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "How long have you been laughing at me behind my back?" Jake stepped into the room, his movements careful, calculated. "Dad, you need to calm down. Your heart..." "My heart?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "My heart was fine until I discovered my wife and son were..." I couldn't even say it. The words stuck in my throat like broken glass. Olivia moved between us, her photographer's instincts perhaps seeing a scene that needed managing. "Mark, please listen. The photos, they're not what they seem. We never meant to..." "To what? Get caught?" The monitor was beeping frantically now. "Was this all a game to you? Find the pathetic widower, make him fall in love while all along..." "It started as a business decision," Jake interrupted, his voice steady. Too steady, like he'd rehearsed this moment. "The couple's content sells better. We needed the money for my film school tuition." I stared at him, horror mounting. "Business decision? You're telling me you prostituted yourself with my wife for tuition money?" She wasn't your wife then. Jake shot back, a flash of defiance in his eyes. And it wasn't real. None of it was real. We never actually... Get out. The words came out like ice. Both of you, get out. Mark, please. Olivia's tears looked so genuine. Had they always been this convincing? Get out. Doctor... Richards rushed in, likely alerted by my spiking vitals, but I barely registered his presence. All I could see was my son leading my wife, his partner, their relationship, whatever twisted thing it was, out of the room. As the sedative Dr. Richards administered began to take effect, one thought kept circling in my mind. How do you rebuild your life when the very foundation was a lie? How do you trust again when the two people you loved most in the world conspired to break you? The drugs pulled me under, but they couldn't numb the pain. Nothing I suspected ever would. 3 months have passed since that day in the hospital. I'm writing this from a small apartment in Portland, over 2,000 miles from what I once called home. The distance hasn't helped as much as I'd hoped. The doctors say I'm lucky. The stress could have triggered a heart attack. Lucky. That's not a word I'd use to describe anything about my situation, though I suppose being alive means I have to deal with the pain, and maybe that's my punishment for being so blind. The truth, as it turns out, is more complicated than I initially thought, not that it makes anything better. After I was released from the hospital, Tom, good loyal Tom, did some digging. The couple's content, Jake mentioned, was apparently a growing trend in the online content creation world. Real-life couples could make substantial money sharing intimate, though not explicit, photos and videos. Except Jake and Olivia weren't a real couple. They were entrepreneurs, as they put it in the letter they sent to my lawyer. The whole thing had started before I even met Olivia. Jake had been trying to find ways to pay for film school without burdening me financially. He met Olivia through some content creator network, and they hatched their plan: create a fictional romantic narrative that would appeal to their target audience. Then I came into the picture. I still don't know if meeting me was part of their plan or just convenient coincidence. The letter claimed it wasn't, that Olivia genuinely developed feelings for me, that Jake supported our relationship because he saw how happy I was. They insist nothing physical ever happened between them, that all the photos were carefully staged, that they never meant to hurt me, but intentions don't change outcomes. Last week, I received an envelope from Jake. Inside was a check for $175,000, his earnings from their business venture. His note said it was for film school, that he'd rather take loans than use that money now. "I'm sorry, Dad," he wrote. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I burned the check. Some things can't be paid for. The divorce was finalized yesterday." Olivia didn't contest anything, didn't ask for alimony. Her lawyer simply handed over her keys to the house and her wedding ring. She tried to include a letter, but I had my lawyer return it unopened. What could she possibly say that would make any difference? Sarah's sister, Catherine, calls regularly to check on me. "You need to talk to Jake," she keeps saying. "He's still your son." She doesn't understand that's exactly why this hurts so much. If Olivia had just been unfaithful with some random man, I could have labeled her the villain and moved on. But this betrayal has corrupted every relationship, every memory. I catch myself sometimes, late at night, scrolling through old family photos on my phone. Photos of Jake's graduation, of our wedding day, of casual Sunday dinners. In each one, I search their faces for signs, for tells that would have revealed their deception. Were they exchanging glances I missed? Were their smiles genuine? Was any of it real? The worst part isn't the betrayal itself. It's the way it makes you question everything. Every memory becomes suspect. Every moment of happiness feels tainted. I find myself wondering if Sarah would have seen through their charade. She was always better at reading people than I was. My therapist says I need to find a way to separate the love I have for Jake from the pain of his actions. He's young, she says. Young people make terrible mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated deception that went on for months. Every dinner conversation, every movie night, every moment we shared as a family was built on lies. I've started volunteering at a local community center teaching engineering basics to high school students. It helps, having something to focus on besides my own thoughts. The kids remind me of Jake at that age, eager to learn, full of dreams, uncorrupted by the world's harsh realities. Or maybe he was already learning to deceive me back then. I don't know what to believe anymore. Yesterday, I drove past a couple taking wedding photos in the park. The bride was young, beautiful, radiant with happiness. The groom looked at her like she hung the moon. I wanted to stop, to warn him, to tell him to look closer, to question everything. Instead, I drove on. Let him have his moment of perfect happiness. Reality will catch up soon enough. I'm selling the house. Too many ghosts there now. Too many rooms filled with memories I can't trust. The realtor says the market is good, that it should sell quickly. I've already decided to donate most of the proceeds to a scholarship fund for young filmmakers. Let some good come from all this pain. Jake called again this morning. Like every other time, I let it go to voicemail. His messages are getting shorter, now less frequent. Soon, maybe they'll stop altogether. Part of me dreads that day. Another part longs for it. Olivia's OnlyFans was shut down last month. I heard she moved back to her hometown in Arizona. Sometimes, in my darker moments, I hope she's suffering. Most times, I just hope I never hear her name again. They say time heals all wounds. I'm not so sure. Some wounds change you fundamentally, alter the very essence of who you are. Trust, once shattered, doesn't just repair itself. Like a broken mirror, you might be able to piece it back together, but you'll always see the cracks. So here I am, starting over at 45. No wife, no son, no home, just questions that will never have satisfying answers and a heart that's learning to beat around the holes they left behind. Perhaps that's the real lesson in all of this. Love doesn't blind us, hope does. Hope that we've finally found happiness, that we deserve it, that it will last. Hope is what makes us ignore the red flags, silence our doubts, trust when we should question, I won't make that mistake again.